Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video, the second one I've recorded today. This is a weekly wrap-up of 3 novels that I read this week. The first, Michael Chabon, Wonder Boys. Now I've only read one Chabon before, which was the Yiddish Policemen's Union, which was pretty ho-hum about. I know everyone raves about Cavalier and Clay, but young boys escaping to a fancy world of comic books, bringing that to life doesn't really appeal to me. So I don't know where I stand on Chabon really, but I saw the book chemists rave about this book, so I thought I'd give it a go. And it's a sort of not so magical mystery tour really, of just a series of slightly off-kilter crazy events in suburbia. The main character is, has a fear of commitment, is a womanizer. Because he has a fear of commitment, he won't make any decisions that he needs to make about a pregnant mistress. Is he going to commit to her and the baby? Is he going to leave his wife? And all, because he can't sort of make any of these sort of confrontations, he just sort of bumbles from one slightly strange situation to another. And it's deeply unsatisfying. It's not funny. It doesn't seem to offer any insights into character other than the character of, such a person who I'm bored with, to be honest. I think it's only funny if you're a stoner, because one of the other things about this character is he smokes a lot of dope, and I got nothing out of it. It is about it is about a writer who's got a 2,000-page, uncontrollable novel that he can't, end. And his agent comes to town for a convention in a university, and the agent is as sort of screwed up as he is. So there are one or two little insights into writing, but as a whole, it just bored the pants off me, I'm afraid. And if you want a stoner novel, Jonathan Lethem, who is, I think, in the same sort of wheelhouse as Chabon, but I think far superior. Lethem does it with Chronic City. That, to me, that is the stoner novel. And if you want the sort of slightly off-kilter stuff of suburbia, what's behind the curtains kind of thing, A.M. Holmes does it with a lot more. It's rooted much more in truth and believability. It's not a stoner journey. This is the dark side of suburbia. With Holmes, maybe it's not quite to the same extreme as Twin Peaks and all that type of stuff. But as I say, to me, it's much more rooted in credibility, and this wasn't. So I gave this 2 stars, and I think that's going to be my final verdict on Chabon. Really, I like Lethem. I like Lethem a lot, and that, to me, Chabon can't hold a candle to him. The next book I read, Personae by Sergio de la Pava. So this is the 3rd book of de la Pava's I've read. That's all 3 of them. His first was A Naked Singularity, which is a superb book. This was the second. This was the follow-up in the way that A Naked Singularity is a big, thick tome, as was his 3rd book, The Lost Empress, or The Last Empress, which I read last year, which is also another massive tome. But this is very much in the same wheelhouse. It's the same themes that obviously obsess de la Pava, and he is what I'd call a slightly philosophical writer. But this book is different from the other 2. This book is genuinely postmodern in its sort of different chapters in different styles. There's not one central character. There's sort of 2 or 3 that it's refracted through. So it starts off with Helen Tame, who's basically the best detective in the world, because just by sort of looking at the body, she can intuit the killer, because she can plot the relationship of the deceased to their murderer. But she comes across a dead 111-year-old Colombian man in New York, and she can't, her intuitive powers are not working for her. They can't lead her to the guy's murder. So we have her sort of story. So part of it is she's being the detective, having a bit of an existential crisis to some extent. But she writes on sort of music, classical music, Bach's Goldberg variations, and then as was reinterpreted by Glenn Gould. So she does sort of academic type or magazine essays, and they're in here as well. So those are the 2 sides of Helen Tame. And then the other main character is, well, I say main character. So the deceased was a writer, and one of the things she comes across in his flat is his, all these sort of notebooks and stuff. So what the another chunk of the book is these works from his writing are sort of produced verbatim. And a big chunk of that is 120 of the 200, no, sorry, is it 120? No, 80 pages of the 200 pages here are of play, a stage play. 5 characters in a room, they seem to be trapped, they don't understand their situation. So it sort of channels, half of it is No Way Out, We Clo by Jean-Paul Sartre, and who has the power at various stages in that room. And the other is Beckett, because the language, they're trying to figure out what their situation is. But they keep sort of pouncing on each other's words and sort of pun or riff off what someone has said to take it in a sort of another direction for for humour or for the status stakes it gives them by being cleverer, but not in terms of solving their dilemma, but in terms of wordplay or whatever. So it's very much like Beckett's Waiting for Godot in that sense. And there's a lot of it, and I'm not sure to what point. There was quite a nice image in there where there's a gun in a glass case and it goes, in case of emergency, please brake, for these characters in whatever situation they're in. That was nice, but then it was kind of undermined because later they get hold of a spear, and I don't know. I don't really know what this book was trying to achieve. It had some interesting observations because, as I say, Della Pava is interested in sort of philosophy and the condition and the human condition and what it is to be a man. And there's definitely bits of that in here. But I felt it was a bit overwhelmed by its sort of the tricksiness of the form, and I couldn't see why it was in the form that it was. In a way, either the Helen Tame stuff or the writings of the guy, they would have made an interesting book in themselves, but bringing them together, it didn't work for me. I think I gave it 3 stars, 3.5, something like that. Can't remember now. And finally, Clarice Lispecter, The Passion According to GH. So this is my 3rd Lispecter book, and none of them have let me down. They've all been superb reads. But this takes it on to another level. I've never had a reading experience as intense as this book. So I'll start with the plot, although, the plot's not really all it's about. So a sculptress who lives in Rio de Janeiro in an apartment. Her maid has left her employment. So she is a bit of a sort of an organisation freak. So she's going to go into the maid's room to clean it up, tidy it and all that sort of stuff. Expecting it to be a bit of a mess. But when she gets there, it's completely, clean and tidy, if a bit dusty. There's nothing in there except a drawing on the wall. And when she opens the empty wardrobe, she sees there's a cockroach on the wood at the back. And the cockroach emerges from the wardrobe, and so she slams the door on it, and it sort of crushes it, in the middle of it. And that prompts some sort of crisis in her, which is the rest of the book. So as I say, the plot is irrelevant because you get these sort of intense meditations. Calling it an existentialist crisis is too easy because it's not necessarily a crisis, because at some of the points there's a sort of soaring, transcendence of thought. A lot of what she says is a negation of itself or provokes the opposition, that you would expect. So that at times, what should be abysmal and abasement are liberating for her, and she soars. And at other times, what should be liberating and of the soul, she finds crushing and abasing. So I'll just give you a quick example of what I mean by that. And this is purely from the language. Perhaps what happened to me was an understanding, and for me to be true, I have to keep on being unable to grasp it, keep on not understanding it. All sudden understanding closely resembles an acute incomprehension. So it just gives you an idea of, she's battling to try and, I think really, root out what it means to be human, what a human soul is. This is all brought about by the cockroach, because as she's crushed the cockroach, this sort of protein stuff comes out of its sort of, impaled body. And she sees it, and it's like, is this a fellow creature that we both have vital fluids, we both have, big eyes and, all this sort of thing? Or are we irreconcilable? Can I merge with this thing or will it remain forever alien to me? And that seems to be important to her in the sense of, she realises the prehistoricness of this creature, of the cockroach. And there's times when she looks out of her window in the apartment, and it's the sort of favelas on the hill, but that sort of mutates into sort of, ancient Constantinople and minarets and stuff. There's nothing substantial. There's no materiality in this book whatsoever. It's all internal. Everything. The only material thing is the room and an empty room and the dying cockroach. But even they, everything there, becomes symbols in her, trying to work out, what she is, where she is, who she is, how she is. It all in one level. This is a solipsistic novel. There are no other characters. If they're referred to, they're symbols. She refers to an unspecified male. He, is that a former lover? Is that the hole in her life because she doesn't have a partner and a child? Or is it her own animus, the male side to her anima being, for completion? And, it just carries on at this intense level of self-scrutiny. And although it's solipsistic, we are invited in because we realise this is about us as well. She's not addressing us. We inhabit her as she, her mind comes up with all this stuff. She's not, we're not an audience. We're inside her head. We are part of that process of her trying to figure everything out. But although it's a solipsistic novel on one level, it doesn't keep us at arm's length. Far from it. We are invited in, into that, which is a sort of strange contradiction because solipsism doesn't really recognise anybody else. And yet the structure of the book is it doesn't recognise anybody else, And this was just a supremely good book. This was a buddy read with Silje, and more by luck than judgment, we sort of pegged it at we're going to do 25 pages a day. And that was about right because there's so much to digest. It's so dense. The language is so lyrical and so contradictory, contradicting itself within the same sentence. So, for example, she towards the end she said something was pungently insipid. Again, that sort of self-contradiction, sort of self-negation. So I think 25 pages for me and Silje worked very well, and obviously we had a lot to discuss after each 25 pages. So it was really fortunate for me that this was a buddy read, because if I'd done it on my own, a solipsistic novel with great density, I don't quite know where my head would have been, but because we were able to sort of discuss and dissect after each session, that was very helpful. So thank you, Silje. And when her review is up, I will come back in the show notes and post a link to it. So I've now read 3 Lispecter books, loved them all. This is the best of the 3. Agua Viva is also a 5-star read, and then the Hour of Our Star, I think it's called, I gave 4 or 4.5 to. And I have to say that she has sort of crashed her way into my pantheon of favoured authors up there with people like Camus and Kafka. Because, obviously I still have more to read by her, but I mean, these first 3 books as my introduction to her are just mind-blowingly good, really. Obviously a note also to her translator, because, this is difficult stuff to translate and get the nuance of what she's saying. Who is the translator? Idra Novi, props to you because you did a fine job on that. So that I'm almost certain is going to be in my top 10 reads of the year. Will it be number 1? Well, just to put it in perspective, so I've had a couple of other 5-star reads so far this, in February, up to February. One was Jenny O'Fill's It's Palm to Speculation, and the other was Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. Both very, very good books, but somehow contained within their covers, whereas this is on a whole different level of appreciation and apprehension, because it's a slightly disturbing book as well. So even though they were great reads, this, as I say, this is on another notch altogether. Okay, so till next time, thanks very much.